So welcome to this live mixdown session. In today's video you're going to see an uncut raw process of how I approach my mixdowns. So let's waste no time and I'm going to show you the track that we'll be mixing down today. So cool vibe, as you can tell, and it's a nice track. It's actually like the perfect track I like to mix down when I'm mixing down for other people, because it's got a great vibe and a great production, but the mix isn't great. So I know from a bit of work I can really elevate this track and really bring it to life. So before we even actually double down and get going, first thing you need to know is actually setting up kind of your template for mixing. So make sure you've got everything grouped correctly in your productions. As you can see, I've got my low end group, my drum group. Serum is all the synths, vocals all grouped together. And then you want to make sure everything's grouped within the groups as well. So claps and snares probably together, all your hi-hats together, top loops together, percussions together. When it comes to synths, you want to make sure all the hits are put in one. So what do I mean by that? So I mean any kind of short synth stab, or anything like this one here. Something that isn't sustained, so that isn't playing for a long period of time. You want to put all of them in a group, and then you want to do the opposite as well. So anything that is sustained and playing for a long period of time, like this lead here. You want to group all of them together because they're just going to require a slightly different processing. And you can do the same with the vocal as well, but there isn't too many vocals in this track to work with. So that's nice and easy for us. Second thing, you want to make sure you either have the full waveform or just a short clip of a track bounce down before you start mixing. It is really nice because then you can jump back to the original while you're mixing. You can see the progression, which is a great feeling, and you can also see where you may have gone wrong. Sometimes the raw, authentic nature of what we do within the production stage is actually the right thing for the track, and then we can come in and actually polish it up too much in the mixdown stage. So it's a nice balance between what's to come and what we've done in the past, and we can find this nice middle ground in the middle, which is nice and authentic. So let's jump straight in and get going with sort of mixing down the low end. So that's what I always like to do first. I believe it's probably the most important part of any house track, and then I work my way down. So from lows into drums, into synths, into vocals, or sometimes vocals first if it's a vocal dominant track. Depends on the vibe, obviously. And then once I've done the bulk of the processing, I'll do some sort of adjustment across the whole track and see if I can tidy things up and make it all clearer. So let's jump straight in and get it looped over a nice section. Okay, so all I'm just doing there is putting Sound ID reference on. This is by Sonarworks. If you don't know what this is a fantastic plugin for anyone who is producing in a bedroom or producing in headphones, or like myself, producing in a fairly small room. You can kind of see that it's like my arm span, so it's not a very big room. All this is doing it is through some kind of clever technology, which is way above my pay grade. It goes around and measures your room with almost like a little microphone, and then it will come up with an EQ curve of what your room looks like with regards to frequency response, and then it will reverse what your room is with an EQ to then get you as close as flat line as possible. So if I just turn that off, you can see I actually get a really big boost from my monitor speakers in my room. So what I just have to do then, or not me, the actual plugin, when I enable this, it does it in reverse, gets it as close as flatline as possible. Why is that a good thing? When your mix is closer to a flat line as possible, or not necessarily your mix, but your frequency response from your speakers, it means it's going to translate better across other mixes. So that's going to sound better in, you know, a car or on a phone speaker, on a laptop speaker. Across the board, it's just better for a more transparent mix across different devices. If you want to watch more super in-depth videos as well, where I'm maybe a bit more focused and tutorial based, then make sure to either check out old videos on this channel or stay up to date with some of the stuff coming in Serotonin Studios, which is my education platform. A lot more tailored and focused rather than this more kind of casual vibe. Okay, so all I'm just doing there is some basic processing with an EQ, just dipping where there's some sort of lacking frequencies, boosting where there was a bit too much. And then with Saturn, which is a multi-band compressor, I was just balancing out the kick, adding a bit more saturation to the top end and that sort of lower mid-range, and then not actually adding any saturation to the very bottom end, sort of that sub-region. There was just no need for it. It was already kind of really pumping and thumping through that sort of area. Through the frequency spectrum, so it was kind of worthless boosting that. Now I'm just freezing and flattening it. The main reason for this is because I want to make sure the relationship between the kick and the bass is very good. It's obviously a very, very important part of any track. So by freezing it and then flattening it, I can see the alterations that I've done to the kick. And in the waveform, when it loads up, so it probably will just look slightly different, a bit more shaped, and then I can go ahead. Yeah, there you go. You can see it's much thicker and much richer. I also am seeing it's a bit too long. You know, if we look at kind of how short the bass notes are, there's kind of a bit of overlap there. Now, overlap's fine. There's, you know, don't have to be so rigid and dogmatic for everything to kind of line up perfectly. But it is a very kind of thick kick for the kind of track that it is. So I'm going to just tighten this up a little bit with some compression, and I'll probably use the Pro C2 for that. Can't go wrong with good old fab filter stuff. Somewhere around there is kind of sounding good for me, so I'll keep it just like that. You can notice there was a bit of a pop there on that first kick, which sometimes you run into the issues of when you're working with stems, especially in Ableton. You may not get it in other issues in other DAWs, but it's quite an easy fix to sort, and sometimes it's actually just from where the point of a track starts. So if you ever have that issue, don't worry too much about it. If you are struggling with it, best thing to do is to find a kick that hasn't got that issue, copy and paste it onto the one that you find an issue with. Problem solved. Right, let's jump in to the bass line now. So just some nice processing on there. The bass was certainly lacking a little bit in this one. So starting off with Max Bass, that is a Waves plugin, super good for an R bass alternative. In my preference, I'm picking that over R bass any day of the week. Just because if I load it up again, you can see that you can control the original bass input with the max bass input independently. R bass is a bit more difficult. I think you can only control the input and then the output of what R bass is giving you. So this is really nice because then you can just control those two and find that nice kind of sweet spot in between them. But it works in a similar fashion. It is driving the bass up dependent on what kind of frequency you set it to, with this kind of little slidey thing here. And as well, it's nice, you got a nice visual kind of thing on the go as well, if you're like me and you're a bit of a visual mixer. Then some creative EQing again with Pro Q3. Super easy. Just cutting the very bottom end off. You just don't need that super low end. It's very hard to hear. You're probably only picking up that kind of 0 to 20 hertz. Well, I've cut it at 30. So 0 to 30 hertz at, a really high end club system. But even then, the human ear can't really pick it up anyways. And then a super nice boost here. So this is actually a trick I got from a Disclosure breakdown, I believe. So he was sort of saying to kind of get that more analog pop into a sound, if you just boost it within this range here, sort of that lower mid-range going into mid-range, it really just helps bring that sort of bass out. Yeah, so you can just hear it, just adds that like little bit of pop, which is great. Works on synths as well, so you'll be seeing me doing that later on. Cool. Last thing for the sort of kick and bass is I'm going to add a bit of compression, and I'm going to see what's going on with bass 1 as well. I don't know if they're the same bass or if they are slightly different. Let's go Pro C2 again. Can't go wrong with it. Because I'm compressing my low end, I'm probably going to go fairly fast attack and a bit slower on the release and dial them in, because I want a nice consistent compression across the board on the bass. So just adjusting the levels there. I like to anchor my mix around a -12 dB kick. Doesn't matter if you're a -6 guy or a -10 guy or a fucking -24 guy. It just depends on what you're used to, right? You can always add more headroom, so that's why I like to, you can never have too much headroom, do you know what I mean? Because you can always boost the signal in the entire track without causing too many issues. But if the track's too loud, deducting signal can be a bit more problematic, but either way, it's not too much of an issue. So sounding nice with just copying the processing down onto there. This is a nice technique as well for just keeping a bit more of a uniform mix, even though the basses are different, you know, they're different sounds in slightly different ways. I think they're playing a slightly different melody as well, but using the same processing and the same kind of concepts when mixing really helps create a more naturally glued together track. Talking about natural glue, that's exactly what I was just doing with Saturn. So just putting a Saturn on the group, again, making sure I'm not adding too much saturation to that very, very bottom end because it's sounding nice and full as it is. But with something like Saturn or any kind of saturator, by putting it on a group or a bus, all the frequencies from, you know, each channel are going into that saturation unit. So you get this like nice natural glue. The way I kind of describe it is like, imagine it's like a blender. You know, you chuck all your ingredients in a blender, blend it up, and, you know, boom, you've got a smoothie. You don't end up with a smoothie when you use Saturn mind, but you do end up with a nice natural glue on the track. So I am gonna just play around with a bit of sidechain. It sounds sidechain to me already. I imagine it is from the stems I got, but I can soon tell by putting a sidechain on here and just playing around and seeing if I can dial it in a bit better myself. So I just need to set up a ghost channel for this. So let's go and grab the kick, copy it across the entire track, and rename ghost. I'll take that out the low end group so it's not causing any confusion. Make it grey to feed my OCD. And then we'll go down to, where'd I put it? There. Boom. Ghost. And I like to flick it over to this view. Just, again, I'm a bit more of a visual mixer, so I can see the threshold and the gain reduction. A really useful thing to know when using the sidechain compressor by Ableton is to bring down the attack pretty much all the way. If you think about what a sidechain is actually doing, it's ducking out the way of a kick. So you want to make it duck immediately as soon as that kick's coming through. So even a 1 millisecond delay is still a delay. So if I can get it to almost instant, brilliant. Then it's initiating as soon as that kick comes in. Release, on the other hand, much like when you're sort of dialing in compression, you kind of almost dial in the release to get that nice groove in the compression. You do the same with like a sidechain setup. So you'll see in a sec, I'll just sit there and I'll bump up the release and I'll take it away and just see where I can find a nice sweet spot, because sometimes you may want the kick to sit above the bass. So you may want to go for a slightly longer release. Sometimes you may want it to sit slightly below the bass, or maybe not below, but in line with the bass. So you go for a nice medium or faster release. So they definitely were sidechain beforehand. You can see I was just starting to kind of tickle it with the gain reduction and the threshold, and it was already sidechaining pretty aggressively. And that's why I knocked down the ratio as well, so it's not got a higher ratio, so it's kind of doing a bit less compression by nature. So kick and bass sounding pretty much spot on. So now I'm going to start adding in the other elements, and then we'll jump into some more bus processing. Quite interesting with this track is Elliot has set up a glue compressor. So this was in his sends group. So it's just the drum group sent to a send and return with parallel compression. And this is actually doing a lot of heavy lifting within the drums. So if I just go up to the drums and solo them, they're very flat without this. Now, typically I would actually delete this and probably redo it, but I'm going to keep it in the track because it makes such a noticeable difference. And as we were kind of talking earlier, you still want to stay authentic to what you originally created, because that's kind of its authentic self. And especially as this is someone else's mix down, I don't want to come in and change too much. It's not my job to do that. It's just my job to make it sound better. So, few things that I was doing with all the clap there. So firstly, just bumping up the gain. It's much easier to figure out what you want to do with the sound when it's louder. Common sense with that. So bumped up the gain on the channel. Then you notice I actually probably took quite a pause before actually doing anything. And this is really, really important. So this is intentionality behind your mixing. Now, you're probably watching this, see me do loads of things, especially by the end of it, you probably hopefully pick up a few tricks and stuff like that. Now, that doesn't mean you need to implement every single one of those things into your mix downs going forward just because you've seen some guy wearing a hat on YouTube tell you to do it. Not true. What you need to do is analyze the sound, so listen, and then think, okay, what can I do to make this sound better? Because sometimes you don't need to do anything. That is the best thing to do for the mix, is doing nothing. Sometimes you need to do a shit ton of stuff because that's the best thing for the mix. So you just need to be intentional. So for me, listen to the clap. Sounds a bit flat, sounds a bit weak. To get this right with the vibe of the track, I need that sort of oomph and grit in the clap. Okay, what processing could I use to get that? Probably some kind of distortion. Decapitate is my best bet. That's my kind of thought process and how I ended up with that decision. Not just, oh, well, I saw some bloke on YouTube tell me to use this plugin on my claps, so better do it. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately, or else we would all be world-renowned music engineers if that was the case. Anyways, then some basic kind of creative EQing. I guess kind of worth mentioning as well for anyone who's sticking around watching this long of a video. These kind of boosts here, you may look at that and go, that's a resonance. I don't know why he's boosting that. Not all resonances are bad resonances. Some resonances actually add a lot of character to the sound or to the track. So if you take away all the resonances, it loses that kind of character. And those two resonances there were actually adding a lot of that kind of bottom end sort of weight into those claps and snares, especially the snare, because the snare's a bit contrast in volume compared to the clap. Just giving that sort of little boost really helps. Okay, quick run through of what was going on there. Trying to tame that real, quite noticeable like ping pong delay echo thing that he's put on the hi-hat. I think that would probably affect like the driving nature of the hi-hat, and if I had the ability to, I would have just turned down the effect, but it's a printed stem, so I don't. So I try to control it by using the de-reverb plugin. Sometimes it works really well on like non-vocal stuff to remove reverbs. Sometimes it doesn't. Probably not the best thing to do on such a important element of the track like an open hi-hat. So that's why I got rid of it. Then this one's actually really cool. Noise suppressor, does what it says on the tin, suppresses the noise. But by doing so, it's knocking those delays just a bit further back. So increasing that kind of like dynamic range, making it sound a bit more lively. Smack attack, playing around with the transients, just giving it a bit more of attack so it has a bit more bite to it, because there's not many drum elements in here, contrast to the amount of synth elements, and they're all going to be in kind of competing frequency places. So just adding a little bit there and taming the sustain as well. Same reason as I kind of just went over in the NS1. If I can bring back some of those delays, then perfect. Kickstart, because it's got that delay on it, I didn't want it to conflict, and it's just a super easy kind of cover your own back thing to do on stuff that might be competing with a kick. And then some EQing again, taking away some resonances, the harsher ones dipping a bit more, the ones that I thought they're not that bad, just very gentle, and then a nice little boost in the high end to add some air. And this one here, which is making a dip where probably we're going to see a bit of a frequency build up, because our clap and snares are probably all going to land in this sort of space, and we'll probably start to see some synths as well in that sort of region. So I think that's that done. Crash sounds good to go. It's from the core kit, so we don't really have to worry about that. The level of it sounded good as well. I need to bring the level down of this one, but coming together nicely with the drums. So to go over what I was just doing there while I find the plugins that I want, I was just playing around with EQs and saturation, pretty much. Nothing that we just haven't been over already in this video. Honestly, like, if you can really master Pro Q3, then your mixes are just going to really stand out. I believe it's Streaky, who's like a audio mixing mastering engineer. I actually did loads of his mixing and mastering courses. That's where I learned 80 to 90% of my information, plus YouTube videos. And he says something like you need to become like a EQ ninja or an EQ warrior or something like that. And it's really true. Like, that is, you know, your chef's knife, the same tool that you're going to use every single time. So the better you can get at using that and understanding, you know, where to boost frequencies and where to dip, the better. And I'm going to forget his name. I'm going to say it's Jason Gents. It's going to really annoy me. I will put text somewhere on the screen who I'm on about. And he basically sort of says, as soon as you understand that you can't really have competing sounds and one of them's got to win and one of them's got to lose, then your mixes are going to go tenfolds. The way I like to look at it is like a stage. Do you know what I mean? Like a performing arts stage. You can only have a certain amount of actors, you know, center stage, because there's only a small amount of room and there's only a certain amount of like spotlights the performing stage can put on the actors at the center. And the same thing kind of applies with mixing. Like, you can only have certain things taking up certain spaces, or else it's all just going to sound too cluttered. And that's exactly what I was doing with this perk loop down here. So I was being super selective of what I wanted to boost with saturation and the band. And I've actually left them on solo because anything underneath that I don't need, so I'm just effectively cutting it in some kind of weird way. I probably should put an EQ on there to cover my back, but hey ho. And then on the end as well, boosting that because it was a bit lacking, but I wanted most of my high end to come from those shakers. And another top tip as well, you can see now as I'm progressing, I'm not putting too many things in solo. Reason being, we don't listen to a mix in solo, right? You listen to the mix's entirety. So the top engineers in the world probably just mix down listening to the whole track. I can't do that just yet. I need to like work my way into it. That's why I start with kick and bass and start to add the sounds throughout the track, you know, starting with the kick and bass. But it's really, really important to start training your ear to listen to the mix's entirety. Just because we have the option to turn things on and off doesn't mean the listener does. So something worth thinking about. Last few bits for the drums. We've got some snares to put in. So I'm just was trying to dictate which snare had a lot of low end in. One of it almost sounded like a kick fill. That's why I kind of scrolled up to have a look at the kick, if you didn't notice. But it didn't look like there was a kick fill in there from my knowledge. I know there is a little bit, but that's fine. It still had quite a bit of low end in anyways, so I'll carve that with an EQ, do a bit of group processing on the snares to help glue them together, and then we can move on to the other elements. I have only got 20 minutes for this live session, so if I don't finish it in time, I will put a clip of a before and after at the very end. But was about to say unfortunately, but fortunately, I've got a one-to-one lesson at 3 p.m. If you didn't know, I do one-to-one online tuition for productions, mixing, mastering, just general kind of like music career advice if you want that as well. All the links are down below, and you can always just drop me a message on Instagram if you have any further questions about it. Right, let's finish up these snares and let's get into the vocals, I reckon. Okay, so I'm actually going to have to eat humble pie and go back on what I said about keeping this one. I feel like I've managed to keep that authentic nature, if not improve it. Well, hopefully, that's what I'm here for. Then keeping this one, so I'm going to scrap that because that frees me up then to do some parallel compression at the end. So I'm just going to, now that we've got to a good kind of like finishing point, go back to the original, take a listen, and make sure I gain stage it between the two, so they're, you know, at a equal or fair volume for comparison. It's going to be a bit difficult because obviously there's so much synths and vocals that we haven't got into yet. That's fine. So let me go onto this one and set this up. Thankfully, I've done a good job. God, I'm going to get my page checked tonight. But you can also still tell it's still a bit of a hard comparison, right? We're comparing a full track to just kick, bass, and drums. But you probably noticed that the kick is really coming through a little bit more, especially that top end. It doesn't feel as boomy, so tick the box with what I was trying to achieve with that. Plus the drums, they just sound so much more crisp, and I haven't even touched on group processing yet, and I mean, that's where things really just start to glue together and emphasize everything. So the fact it's already sounding this much better at this stage, I'm clearly doing something right. So I'm gonna do the sound effects and the vocals, and then we're probably gonna have to wrap things up for this video. But let's just do the sound effects one real quick because this should be so easy to do. Yeah. So let's just bump this up so we can see it on the waveform. And all I'm going to do to sound effect, if you're processing and EQing sound effects, probably wasting time. Maybe we need to carve out the bottom end, but that's probably about it. Other than that, bit of reverb, bit of delay, so it all has like a nice tail to it. That's a very common problem I see in a lot of mixdowns and just productions that I do all the lessons with, is that people will not put any kind of effect on the end, so the sound effect will build and it will just bing, cut out, and it will just won't sound very professional. All you need is a slight reverb or delay tail, or both. Usually easily rewind that. Usually it's easier to do it with send and returns. I don't know why that was so difficult to say. So let me just show you what I mean. Okay, so Elliot's clearly done it, which is great. You can tell it just fades out really nicely, but this is what I often see, right? So just an effect that will cut out really quickly. It just doesn't sound as professional compared to if I just give it a bit of reverb and a bit of delay. And some people will come to me when I do mixdowns and stuff like this, or even if I do a mixdown session, they see it live and they go, oh, I want it dry. I'm like, trust me, like when the track is all playing together, you won't actually notice this. Same thing that we just touched on previously. So just adding that, it means it flows into the next section nicely. So let me just bring that back because he's done that perfectly. And all we just really need to do is just check the volume of this. Interesting, two things. We're going to come back to the other one and fix that. First thing, sound effects, all good to go. So I'm going to do two simple effects here. We're going to leave the reverb and delay that I put on. That's not going to cause any harm. I'm going to put a sidechain plugin on it, like Kickstart, 20-30%, just to help give it that kind of slight pumping effect. You don't want it too heavy, or else it sounds like a mainstream kind of tech house track. Nothing against mainstream tech house, but you don't want that kind of vibe with this kind of track. So just a tiny bit of Kickstart and some kind of stereo imager. So I'm going to get the PS22 XSplit and put that on like so. Really need to stop playing when the microphone's on. Cool, so that's all good to go. The interesting part was where these two overlap. Now, I've actually got call with Elliot tomorrow for a lesson, so I may be able to bring up this with him, but you could tell as soon as it dropped in, it just sounded completely muddy, just unbalanced, unclear what was going on. And that's because now we have two conflicting bass lines. So let me play it, and you guys can just pay close attention to what it actually sounds like. So we'll play it over like here where it's not conflicting, and then I'll play it over there so you can see the contrast between the two. Does not sound good whatsoever. So there's two things we can do to fix this. Firstly, we can just get rid of it, right? If this was my production, it's probably what I'd be doing. I'd just be deleting it. It's not my production, so I can't do that. So what can I do to fix this problem? Easiest thing is probably to cut the low end with an EQ. So we go fairly high and get these balanced out. So something like that with the EQ, a little cut and then a little boost to try and contrast from the main bass. It's still barely audible, and actually all it is causing is an issue with the levels then. So you saw it came up about 1 decibel, 0.5 decibel, anywhere between that sort of region. And the bass is kind of like the last thing you want to really vary too much in volume, because imagine you're in a club and the bass gets loud 1 minute and then quiet the next. Now, yes, we're only talking about decibel, but a decibel with those kind of punchy low end frequencies is noticeable. You can notice a decibel difference. So I will speak to him tomorrow when I see him on the call, but that's a really good fix to sort that issue. For those that are screaming at me saying, yeah, but what about when it's not conflicting? Yes, I know I need to go and automate this on and off. So something like that, so then it doesn't cause an issue for that section, nor does it cause any issues up there. Problem solved. Okay, how are we doing for time? We're doing all good. So let's have a look at the vocals, see if we can get these in. Well, not see, we will get these in. So let's start with the easy sort of chops. A lot of the time with these chops, we don't really have to do too much with regards to the mixing. It's more about just finding the right space with the levels. So you can see exactly what I meant before I started doing that. Basic kind of level checks, a few little things with EQ. That telephone vocal EQ is a sick stock Ableton effect. It's, well, the intention behind putting that on there was for contrast. So we've now got contrast in the sounds of the vocals. So we've got that nice sort of short and snappy hit. And then we've got those two more echoed ones, but there's also now a contrast between the two echoes. Bit of stereo imaging as well. So one was fairly off to my right, and then one was a bit more central. So I thought they got a bit nice call and response. Let's do that within the stereo field. So pushed this one here slightly off to the left, and then that was the one that was off to the right. Bit too much, so I brought it in slightly. Now, that was kind of it. Obviously Arvox on there as well. Really, really good vocal compressor. Dead simple to use. No attack, release. Any plugin like this has got my heart because I'm a pretty simple guy. And that's all I've got time for today. Unfortunately, I will throw a before and after up at the end of this video so you can see the full result. Obviously, I've got the main vocal to put in, the synths to put in, and then the group processing as well for all this to really come to life. Like I mentioned, there is plenty of good videos on this channel, even though they may be a bit old. Or if you want to see all my up-to-date content, then you can join Serotonin Studio in the link below. Any questions, just drop me a message, and I will see you in another video.